This is a very brief history of release engineering. Thank you, Effie. This was going to be a 45-minute talk, and program committee came back and said, can you do this in 20 minutes? I'm like, sure. So that's the very. I was at Google for 13 years, 7 years as a release engineer, 6 years as a release engineer, 7 years as a TPM, and I was a release engineer before Google. Even as a TPM at Google and in my current job, I've kept involved with different aspects of release engineering because it's my passion, and so it's something I just always drift back to or try to get involved in. So this was my talk, the outline for my talk submission. And thanks to Effie, we're not going to do this. I was looking at this and I'm like, this is really boring. I don't want to talk about this. So the idea behind this, submitting this, was I've been thinking in the back of my mind. I enjoy technical writing. I've written for a bunch of publications over the years. And I wanted to write something about release engineering. And when I was looking for a job, manager at Microsoft came to me and said, hey, we want to pick your brain about release engineering. And so I thought, you know, it might be interesting to write something on the history of release engineering, but I'm not convinced yet. Because when I look at this, I'm like, I'm interested. I don't know if anybody else is. So what was that? I don't know which part of that sentence he's agreeing with. They're agreeing, but thank you. So here's what we're going to talk about. So in my best Sheldon Cooper voice, what is release engineering? Because I can't talk about the history of release engineering unless we know what release engineering is. So I asked Google search, and Google's new image-based results came up with 2 top results. One of them was Wikipedia. Thank you, Effie, again. I told her I was going to pick on her in this talk. And the other one was kind of not surprising, the chapter I'd written on release engineering for the Google SRE book. So, you know, Google reporting results about Google. So then I asked some of the best minds I could find. So AI chatbots. Actually, I meant y'all. So if you want to, I'll just keep going. I posted this question in the Slack channel for this. I'm curious to know if y'all come up with words that these other great minds didn't come up with. But I'm going to keep going. So if you want to, feel free to add your 2 cents into that. It'll take a few seconds. I'll take a drink of water, and then we'll proceed. So this is the bingo card I came up with. Literally, all of these things came out of the previously cited sources. Some of them were me, from things I had published. But this is quite the conglomerate of things. And, it's, if you did the same thing for software engineering, I think the bingo card would be much smaller. And so here we have a field that is ill-defined, critical to software productions, anything related to the internet or our day-to-day lives. And this is the definition we have. So, how do you write a history about this? Quickly, is there anything you all thought of that's not on this list? Nothing? I don't believe that, but that's okay.
Canaries.
I'm sorry, what?
Canaries.
Canarian, yep. Anything else? Roll back. I'm sorry? I did. Self-healing. That's a different talk, I think. I'm sorry? Security gating. That's a good one. Well, they're all good ones. Okay, there are no bad suggestions here, but that's one I had not thought of, so thank you. So this is from a talk I did in 2014 at a conference on the 10 Commandments of Release Engineering, which surprisingly enough, when I looked at this to prepare for this talk, they're still valid today, but I'm not going to talk about those because that's not what this talk's about, but I will reference it in the slides. But here's a flowchart of release engineering at Google. And this is still pretty true. We have canaries on this one. And so I found it interesting that 10 years later, all these concepts are actually still true, but how we do them are different because we've got better tools, better technology, faster hardware. So now, what is a release train engineer? Yeah, we're not going to do that. But evidently that is a thing. I discovered that when I was looking for a job because I was like, well, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll go back into release engineering. Or maybe I can find a TPM job that involves release engineering, product management, all the things I'm interested in. And I kept running across this release train engineer. And we won't go into that. But it wasn't something I wanted to do. So let's go back to the original programming. So at Google, we had release engineering job ladder. There were well-defined roles. What you ended up doing depended a lot about what service you were working on, what org you were working in, but basically lots of similarities, common tooling, continuous integration, continuous delivery was the gold standard. So funny story about that. When I was interviewing for my current job, the person who's now my manager asked me, have you done any CI/CD? And I had to think about it because we didn't really call it that at Google. And so I said, wait a minute. And I looked it up and I said, oh yeah. I said, yes, I can definitely do it. And here's how we did it at Google. And here's what we called it and so forth. So that's what life is like in the Google bubble. Sometimes you aren't aware of what's going on out in the industry. So a long release cycle was a month, and that was for our production image, which I worked on for several years. What I found was that the closer the software and the features are to the end user, the faster we released new features. And the closer the software was to the hardware, the slower we released, because you want a really solid production base, and the things that are built upon that production base, you really want to be reliable. There's not as big a need to roll out fast features quickly because the features don't change that much. So a month was a long time. I had the philosophy that just because you can release quickly doesn't mean you should. Releasing every hour may or may not be beneficial. And we did end-to-end testing, building, deployment. If you see the bingo card and slide 5. So RelEng outside Google. So here I'm still defining what release engineering is. So what I found in my job search was that job posting for release engineers were actually looking for different things. you really had to read the job description to understand what they were looking for. And so that made it more difficult to do job searches, because maybe there were some jobs out there that were release engineering jobs, but they didn't call them that. But if you could find the job and the job description, that's what they were talking about. CI/CD is not used everywhere or for everything. This is true at my current company. I'm working for MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database. And I'm in our server team, and we actually have a very slow release cycle because our customers don't necessarily want or need new features quickly. They want things like performance improvements, maybe tooling outside of the database, monitoring, and so forth. So we aren't using CI/CD right now. And so that was a surprise to me. I'm like, everybody's doing this, but no. A release cycle might be measured in years instead of days, days, weeks, or months, like at Google. At MongoDB, we just released our 8.0 release, and 9.0 is scheduled for 2 years from now. And so that's an interesting way of thinking about things in terms of release engineering. And on our cloud side, we're much faster than that. But on the server side, we're not. And so I'm having to really think differently about things, which I think is a good thing. I was in the Google bubble for a long time, and it's nice to challenge yourself. Customers still install software. I hadn't thought about that because Google customers don't install software. At least they don't install it on their own iron. And a lot of customers out there still do. They get software from their software vendors and they install it on their own iron. And I'm not talking about networking devices and so forth that you might own, but usually those are installed, downloaded over the internet and installed automatically. So, everybody clear on what release engineering is? I'm not, so. So the history of it, let's back to our original scheduled programming. So in the beginning was the command line. I was trying to figure out how long I've been doing this, and I'm ashamed to say I think I've been doing this for 40 years. And so I have used punch cards. Anybody else here use punch cards? Yay, okay, I'm not the only one. So after punch cards, there was the command line. Portable media was the delivery mechanism. You had to worry about things like, okay, what kind of devices do our customers have to be able to read this media? Is the media, can you ship the media? Do you have to worry about damage to the bits when you ship them? You have to, what do you put on the media? How is the customer going to install it? Lots of things to worry about that we don't have to worry about when we totally control the environment that the software is running in. Release cycles were long. I'm trying to remember. The first proper software company I worked for was Tivoli Systems, and I don't remember. I just remember we were happy to get releases out when we did. I was in the very early days. But you had to worry about things about fulfillment, because once you got it done, you had to worry about packaging and installation scripts and all of that. And then getting it either burned onto CDs or copied onto tapes, however you were distributing it. So this took a long time. Today we can distribute software instantly. Compute network speeds were bottlenecks, and able to build distribute, build, test, all the things on the bingo chart, even though we didn't call them those things on the bingo chart, and the post. You know, if you're shipping this media, you know, you had to worry about overseas and lots of issues that we just don't have today. This is analogous to speaking at conferences back then. Does anybody remember doing the transparent slides and having to make sure that, you know, you safely got them to the conference and they were in the right order, and you could, and then the terminal room where you stood in line so that you could check some emails and log onto your machines at work. And that's if your work had internet access back then. So it's really analogous, because you look now, everybody's got electronic devices. We've got you know, terminal room. So things have changed drastically. Today, we have sophisticated tooling, software downloads for literally everything, faster hardware, you know, continues to be an enabler. And meaning computers, networking, the internet, everything is an enabler to allow us to do things faster and think about doing things in ways we couldn't before, just because it was too slow to even think about that. And that is the end of my talk. We have some time for questions, if there's any questions or opinions.